Hello, hello. This is Frank with Talking Ears. This week we have a feed drop from the Sound Discussions podcast. Juan Vasquez and I were invited to guest on the show, and we had a great time speaking with Nate, Neil, and Ben. Their show usually focuses on various aspects of music production and audio. They had some excellent questions about hearing loss prevention and hearing health. So without further ado, let's get into the episode of Sound Discussions podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Sound Discussion. Each episode, we discuss a music topic which we have all had first-hand experience with. These will be anything from getting started, recording, playing live, mixing, mastering, and everything in between. Most episodes, we will have a special guest to bring their professional experience to the discussion. So, let's get started.
This month on the show, we're diving into the world of hearing health, and not with just anyone. We've got two doctors in the house. Dr. Frank Wartinger, the founder of Earmark Hearing Conservation in Philadelphia, and Dr. Juan Vasquez, a Chicago-based audiologist, whom I met when he was working with Sensophonics, and is passionate about keeping musicians' hearing performing at their best. Together, they host the podcast Talking Ears, where they break down what it really means to listen well, from in-ear monitors and tinnitus to everyday habits that protect our hearing in the studio and on stage. Whether you're a musician, engineer, or just someone whose life is made better by music, this is one episode you'll want to hear, literally. Juan and Frank, welcome to the podcast this month. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Wonderful. If you guys wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and sort of how you got to where you're at.
Well, I'll start off, I guess. My name is Juan Vasquez. I'm an audiologist based in Chicago, and I actually started my career, my journey as a musician out in Southern California where I grew up. I recorded, performed music, and that was my trajectory. That was my plan. Life happened. I actually was not admitted into a university bachelor program for the music degree, but the university said, you got to do something. You got to pick something. It was at that time that I discovered audiology. And I thought, ooh, this is a little interesting. Kind of made sense too. I was able to find a degree where I can sort of marry my two passions of music and sound and a new sense of, hey, it feels good to help people. And so life happened. I got admitted into a program, and now I really focus and work primarily with musicians on, giving back to the population and to our people for how they can, have career longevity and make sure that their hearing is as healthy as they can be. So that way they can continue to give art to the world. And I think that just helps everyone in this crazy time that we're in.
Awesome. Nice. Couldn't agree more.
Yes. Yeah. Seriously. My story is pretty much exactly the same as Juan's. I was a musician. I did audio engineering for a while, went to school for that, and loved doing front of house and studio work. I ran a couple stages for a while, and then I realized that my own ears were getting kind of messed up and couldn't find anybody to deal with that. And I have a little bit of an obsessive personality, so I just bought some textbooks on something called audiology, and decided to read those, and then got down the rabbit hole. And that was the way that I figured out how to help my ears, was to go back to grad school, which is a wild and silly thing to do. And now same boat as Juan. I work with musicians. I work in industrial and occupational health, hearing loss prevention and hearing conservation. But my main passion is just working with audio folks and sound people and making sure we can do what we do.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Two actual experts on this podcast. This is going to be terrifying.
Yeah, I know.
Sure.
I love it.
I'm not sure quite how this is going to go, because we're going to look stupid, boys.
Well, there's one thing that I've been saying out a lot that I've heard is when you do live music and maybe you have in-ear monitors, and I see this out all the time, where people will have one ear in and one ear out, and I'm like, you are going to ruin your hearing, because you're gonna have, yes, you want to hear the stage, yes, you want to hear, and that's why people do it. They'll put one ear in, and then they want to hear the live sound out, but they keep turning up the volume because like the ear, you guys know more than I do about this, but it compensates, like the ear compensates and starts to compress or whatever, and then you're like, oh, I need to hear more, and then you start turning it up, and you have both in ears in.
Please do.
And if you need to hear the stage, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. You can use another microphone, like maybe a condenser mic at the front, or Westone, some brands out there have in-ear monitors that actually allow some outside noise in. So the surrounding, you can, that's what I use. I use these Westones that allow, now it sounds like everything's 12 dB lower, but I can hear the audience.
Is it an opening that
think
sound
so,
can
but
come
it doesn't,
in, or is it like noise-canceling headphones that have an external microphone that allow for ambient, outside sources to be heard?
So I believe the
those have a
technology.
vent,
Yeah, these have a vent. The Westone ones have a vent. Yeah,
interesting.
But I know what you're talking about, Nate. But I feel
like your AirPods or your my Google Pixel Buds, they have an external microphone that allow me to hear the world around me and my music, and then I can noise cancel and shut the world out completely.
So the phenomenon you're experiencing, Neil, is when one person has it out, is the issue is binaural summation. They're not listening through both ears, so their brain is essentially losing about 6 dB of perception. Same thing happens when you pan something to the left or to the right. If you pan hard one side, it sounds about 6 decibels louder than if it's coming out evenly in the middle, which kind of doesn't make logical sense, right? It should be louder because it's coming out of two sources, but instead it's perceived louder because it's just in one ear. More evidence through headphones. But yeah, these people are, you're essentially shooting yourself in the foot. I think, unfortunately, most people do that just simply to look cool. Because it does look cool.
It does. You get the
really?
dangling one. Yeah.
You think it's a cool factor?
Kind of does look cool, yeah.
Yeah, it's like
untucking
your shirt. Yeah, it just looks cool. Right? So there's a little bit of like a rock and roll factor, like I don't live by the rules.
Right. I can buy that.
It's not great for the ears.
But a lot of musicians do tell me that they do it because they want to hear like the stage volume too, and what's going on live around them, and being able to hear the audience if like somebody shouts out a song or whatnot. And I get that too. But that's why I actually bought the Westone ones, so that I could actually hear the audience.
But you're totally
does that
right.
Help you? Neil?
What's that?
Does that actually help you then?
Yeah. Oh, cool. Absolutely. Like, it's quieter when people talk to me, but I can still hear them. So sometimes I still have to take it out and hear if I'm talking to somebody in the audience. Sometimes I still have to do that, but for the most part, I can hear the audience clapping, cheering, calling out things, and so that's helpful as opposed to like straight. All you're hearing is like it like mutes everything around you. All you hear is what's in your in-ears. So it does give that I can hear what's going on around me feel.
Sorry, Neil. Hold on. What was that?
Yeah, go ahead.
You could hear the audience clapping and cheering. We play in very different bands, my friend. Very different bands.
Not every show does that happen.
Moan and boo.
Get off the stage.
Or just silence.
My favorite is when there's a bar like 20 feet away from the stage, and that's where everybody is, and so you hear like the random in the back.
Yeah. It's good.
Well, I worry that there's going to be a trend that happens here, so we'll have to take your lead. But Juan and I could probably talk easily, each of us, for about 2 hours on this one specific subject that you just brought up of ambience and in-ear monitors. So I don't know how much depth you guys want to dive into with these things, because there's a lot there.
I'm a drummer and a mastering engineer, but drummer for most of my life. So I've spent my entire life hitting very loud things. Back in the day with no hearing protection at all.
And I've stood next to the drummer without
Yeah.
any hearing protection. So
Yeah, and I mean,
yeah.
I ran front of house for a friend's band for a little while they were sort of touring and stuff, and one of the PA speakers blew a fuse, so ran over, took the fuse out, put the new fuse back in. I mean, it was on, right? So the second the new fuse went in, it was very loud by my ears.
Yeah.
All that, all that kind of thing, ringing for 3 days. So I'm not going to be the
stuff.
person to I can't be the one who says you should definitely do this, people. But what I do think is important is in-ears weren't a thing back then either, weren't invented because I'm the oldest person here. But I think it is important that we get the message across about hearing protection. So
It really
you
is.
say how deep do you want us to go? I think from my point of view, I would love
You think
to
it's
have-
important?
I think it's really important. And I think what I'd love to hear from both of you is practical things that people should do. Because I think it's great to understand, like you guys are scientists, right? You know the actual science behind what goes on in your ears. But I think the bit that's important to people is what can they do practically? If they're playing in a band, if they're going to see, my daughter just went to see Taylor Swift, it's going to be loud because that's the joy of going to a gig. How can you make sure that you do that safely without looking like an idiot and wearing great big headphones over your head, kind of thing?
Yeah, and I'll
look cool.
say
Could do.
something, Frank, about what you said in your introduction, and that is you just got some textbooks and you started to dive in and learn. And I really relate to that as a, sort of a professional, non-professional with a lot of things, is I'll get books from the library or I'll go to a used bookstore and buy books on whatever subject, like home improvement or electrical or whatever, and learn about it. And I'm not trying to become a licensed electrician, but I want to know everything I possibly can about what I'm about to do because, you know what? It might kill me. So let's be informed, right? And so I think that with a lot of different professions and a lot of different trades out there, a lot of people don't really care so much about how the sausage is made. But in this case, I really think that knowing how our hearing works as tools that we all use, I think that everybody should know how your ears work and how sound waves, interact with your inner ear and all of that. I think that we really should know how the sausage is made in this case. Now, we don't have to go into that much. Huh?
Is that a pun?
Is that a
How
pun?
the sausage is made in this case?
Oh, God.
You said it twice, so I wasn't going to say anything the first time, but then you said it twice. So I was like, is that a
It must be really
that a
important, Ben.
Yeah, had a good bite to it.
That was snappy. I like that. But in this case, I think that it is important. And so, for people who are musicians or music lovers, and they know that going into loud environments isn't good for you, but yet they go into those loud environments without hearing protection. And they might be listening to this podcast and say, okay, maybe I need to pay attention. I'm getting up in age. I notice a difference in my hearing, or I'm still young and I have great hearing, but I want to make sure I have great hearing for as long as I possibly can. What is just the beginning steps that somebody can begin to look into protecting their hearing? Who should they reach out to? What should they invest in? What should they look out for when it comes to hearing loss?
Yeah,
And what is not true? What is out there? Because there's going to be stuff for sale.
What
is
is a myth
useless.
out there?
And what are some scenarios that you would use certain products and certain things in?
Yeah.
So we'll
of
shut up for
questions.
the next 90 minutes.
Yeah, go.
Well, there's a lot that's not true, right? One of them is, 1 in 6 kids now, by the time they turn 20, have a hearing loss from listening to music, going to concerts. Firearms is a big one. So age is not the only reason. So we should all be worried about this from a younger age. The second thing that's not true is that you don't need to spend $1 billion or even hundreds of dollars to protect your ears. Over-the-counter earplugs are perfectly fine for concerts. There's $20 models that sound almost as good as the $200-$300 custom ones. I love custom earplugs, but we give these to professionals too, and they use them as backups or use them on stage. So
It's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to break the bank to do that. And if you're worried about spending $20 on a pair of earplugs to go see Taylor Swift, how much did you spend to go see Taylor Swift? And
Let's
how
not
much
have
is
that
that
conversation.
Yeah, and how much is that soda that you're drinking or whatever? So
Yeah, exactly.
$20 is really nothing to spend on protecting your ears. So
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to say up front.
So even
go
the low cost ones that you see like in the pharmacy here, the drugstore, that they're reasonable, they're usable, or better than nothing. Is that the sort of
Certainly better than nothing. Now, in the case for actually being able to still enjoy the music, that option may not always be the most appropriate in that situation. So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of hearing protection devices. But what is going to be the best in this situation for this scenario, particularly with music? It's something that we still want to be able to have high fidelity, but some protection, some degree of protection from that really intense amplitude, all that volume, that can be hazardous to our hearing over time. So it's really protecting from the intensity while maintaining and preserving that fidelity. So there are options, but certainly something is better than nothing. I'm not sure if Frank would agree with toilet tissue in the ears. I've seen that several times.
It does a
in
couple
concerts.
dB in the highs.
Maybe a couple, yeah, but there are better options for sure. So, but there are plenty.
Yeah.
What you'll want to look for is something that's labeled for music or for concert listening, and look for the word filtered with it. The lowest cost one that I'm aware of is about $15. So less than that, you're not really getting a filtered thing that gives you a good quality music experience. You could easily spend $200 on these over-the-counter ones. I would keep it in the $20 to $40 range. I kind of don't want to name names just because, like, again, there's 30 or 40 models that are decent, and you just go with whatever feels good in your ear.
But as long as they're for music, right? Like for audio listening. Okay.
So that
things
jug
like foam
from
earplugs
from the hardware store with the jug of plugs, that's not going to cut it.
Those are good for power tools, but unless you're going to see a band made entirely of power tools, it's going to be a pretty bad experience.
That would be pretty cool, actually.
Actually, I wouldn't mind that. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Are you guys seeing an uptick in younger and younger kids with hearing loss? Because I work at a high school, and the number of kids that I see walking around wearing headphones and earbuds just all the time, they never take them off.
Yeah.
Are you guys seeing that? Is that a
Absolutely.
thing, or is that like?
So according
what
to
would
the
you
numbers,
recommend to them?
Yeah, according to the numbers, there's technically it's getting slightly better in the last like 15 to 20 years, but the sources of the sound have changed, right? 30 years ago, there was a lot of kids being exposed to firearms and farm noise and some industrial noise. And now it's iPods and, well, not iPods anymore. What is it? iPhones or whatever, right? It's just music listening. It's esports. It's
Personal devices.
personal devices. Thank you. Saved me. I didn't want to name brands, and then I just dropped a bunch of Apple products on you guys.
That's all right. We're not beholden to any sponsors on this podcast, so go for it.
Apple, if you want to sponsor Sound Discussions, give us a call.
They'll just listen to our last episode where we totally just dissed on apples.
But yes, unfortunately, we see, like I said, 1 in 6 kids have a hearing loss that's bad enough to keep them from being an airplane pilot, bad enough to keep them from certain jobs and certain futures. And that's a sad number right there.
You said esports as one of the things that is a contributing. Is that the sort of Call of Duty sort of thing, or is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And is that because they just have their headphones too loud? Is that the?
Yeah.
Wow.
Video games.
Video game. I'd never.
And I can imagine that the repetitive percussive sound of gunfire, those are loud spikes, right? Those aren't smoothed over average dBs. Those are high intensity, really quick shots of sound, and that I find
that fascinating. I'd never.
That's
thought
harmful. Very much.
What about like the droning of like you're driving a car? The esports
Same thing.
like
Well, and think about the sound design of those games. It's quite incredible if you take a moment to listen to it, even if you're not playing. But all the firearms are live samples. All the cars are live samples, and then played through gamer headphones at full volume can easily reach 140 dB peaks, the same as the firearm. So these kids are essentially going through basic training at the age of 8, which is terrible for your ears, amongst probably other things, but we'll stick to the ears for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not make a social commentary.
Sorry, whoops.
No, it's quite all right.
Yeah. Wow.
It's more the listening, the loudness levels, and for how long they're listening to.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's why that can be one source where we're seeing a lot of hearing injury. Where is it coming from? It's, all these listening devices, and then they take them out, and then they game for maybe 5 hours straight. And so it's just this added cumulative sound exposure, that is probably at a hazardous level. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're hitting on something really important, Juan, and that is duration.
Yeah.
Short bits of high exposure are bad, but long bits of high exposure is killer. Yeah. Absolutely.
When I'm working with folks, I just emphasize, and just something pretty simple, the ears, the sensory receptors in our cochlea, our hearing organ, those are fine sensory cells. They're not muscles. They don't get stronger with more loudness over time. They get weaker. And it doesn't matter what the sound is. Loudness is loudness. It will affect the ears. So.
So is loudness one of the sort of key defining things that is the core? I know this sounds really obvious, but is it more the sheer volume that is most detrimental? I mean, I travel quite a lot, and I've got some Bose noise cancelling full over ear headphones. Bose are welcome to also sponsor the podcast. And I used to travel with like AirPods in, and one of the things I found with the Bose is I can actually have it much quieter because they're noise cancelling and they're over my whole ear. Yeah. I can actually have the volume a lot quieter and still hear everything that's happening. Is that one of those things that's quite a simple sort of alternative for people, that instead of having earpods in and turning them up, have a better pair of headphones and have them quieter? Do you know what I mean? It's like, is that an easy scenario for people?
Yeah. I like to think of it like certain headphones are going to allow you or support you in your safe listening. Other headphones are going to sabotage you, right? The old AirPods and a lot of other earbuds had vents in them so that the dynamic driver could work, and essentially you were just listening to the outside world. And that stinks, because if you want to listen above cabin noise, average cabin noise is 80 to 85 dB in a commercial airplane. You want to listen above that, we're going to be listening at 90 to 95 dB. And that's going to ruin your ears after a couple hours flight. So it's loudness or intensity, to be scientific. If you want us to be scientific, it would be intensity. And then it's also the duration of it. So if you're going to listen to that for 2 minutes, so what, right? If you're going to listen to it for 2 hours, then we've got a problem.
Wow.
Right? I like to use the sun exposure analogy, right? If you're going to walk outside on the beach in the middle of the sunny day to go from an umbrella to your car, I'm not so much worried about the sun exposure, even though it's very intense. But if you're going to lay out in the full, with your birthday suit out or whatever, in the sun for 2 hours at noon on a sunny day, right? You get this, Neil. You're in Florida.
Yeah, you're going to be a lobster. Absolutely.
Absolute lobster.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. You're going to be a lobster. Yeah. Use sunscreen. It's another PSA moment.
We could be sponsored by sunscreen.
We'll be sponsored by anything. We're not fussy.
No, we really aren't. I'll take a granola company if that's.
I love granola. What a great shout!
I love granola. Yeah,
I'm in.
I've found that walking, we all have personal devices on us now, phones, and endless applications that we can download. And one of those that I have is a dB meter, And I don't use it all that often, but when I'm in a situation where I know it's really loud, I'm just curious to see how loud is it, right? How close am I to the sun right now? And so, for example, when I was at NAMM, which is where I met you, Juan, walking around the main floor where all the instruments were, I just had my dB meter open and just sort of periodically checking it as I was walking around. And I was not surprised to see it peaking at around 110, 120 dB at times, sometimes louder.
That's loud as well.
That's loud as hell. I couldn't believe. And that was, in some cases, the sort of standard resting mode of my dB meter was around like 90. It didn't really drop below that in most cases. So I think that people should absolutely be aware, especially if you're in a music industry or you're a musician. Have your phone out with a dB meter and just check how loud is it around you right now, because it may not feel. Yeah, it doesn't cost anything. They're free, and it doesn't feel like it's loud. But when you see the numbers, that's going to tell you otherwise. And you're sitting at that bar with your friends, and we could talk about the effects of alcohol on hearing perception. That 2 hours in a bar with a band and beer, that's loud, and that's getting into danger territory, because now that's loud and long exposure.
So what is the number on your SPL meter that you should start taking notice of? Because I'd look at it and I'd be like, is it loud in here? Is there a guide that, like, once you're above a certain amount, you're like, okay, I can't be here for long, or I need to start wearing hearing protection?
Yeah, it's a good question.
There is a number, and with these numbers, I would, especially for the listeners, and I would imagine the listeners are wondering about this for music exposure. These numbers were established for industry, so factory settings, construction, military, sounds that exist, but it's not the product, it's not the intention. It's really just, not by accident, but it's that different situation. So these numbers are specified to these industry standards. At 85 dB, that's when things start to get hazardous for a working day, generally up to 8 hours. So at 85, that's considered potentially hazardous. The louder it gets from there, the less safe time that we have. To put it simply.
So it is over time. That was going to be my question. Like, yeah, sure, 85 decibels. Like, we sometimes hear live bands play above that and whatnot.
Yeah,
but
easy.
Like over time, like if you're doing 85 decibels for 8 hours, that seems intense.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
and an important point there is that the number that you should be looking at on your sound level meter to be referencing these points is the average, or what's usually listed as the LEQ, the long-term equivalent average. And that number is going to tell you like that. It's kind of like a LUFS or an RMS on like your DAW. Mm-hmm. It's going to tell you what that app. I love talking to audio engineers. You guys just nodded so hard when
Yep. It's an average.
Connected with you.
Speaking my language.
Great.
It's not the peaks, it's the average. Yeah,
not the peaks. The peak doesn't mean much, right? The peak means there's a moment, so what? That's like walking from the car to your umbrella, but it's the average that you're worried about. So the average on the NAMM floor is, like you said, 90. That's rough, right? According to some of the conservative estimates, that's only safe for about 2.5 hours, and I'm guessing you're out there for longer than that. OSHA allows you to be out there for 8 hours at 90 decibels. So,
8 hours?
There's some 8 hours.
Without hearing protection or with hearing protection?
Just raw dogging it out there in the noise.
Jeez.
Rough, right?
Your ears would be ringing by the end of that day.
I couldn't handle not having earplugs on the NAMM floor for more than about 5 minutes.
Yeah, because you know better. Yeah.
I knew better, but I also, it started to make my ears hurt and fatigue, and just like and I needed to shut the world out. Like I couldn't even.
Absolutely.
I felt agitated. Actually, it started to make me feel agitated, so I needed to calm down and put some earplugs in.
So you had a really good question, which is what are the numbers that people should be looking at in music settings? The average show is running between 95 to 105. Long-term average across. We usually do a 15-minute average. in live music. So if you're peaking at 105, you're at the upper limits of what's reasonable and frankly safe for even yourself or anybody around you. 95 is a really nice thing to aim for, and then have louder moments because fun. In a studio, we should be down near 80 to 85. Film studios usually get up to 85 dBc. And then your mixing studio, somewhere around like 75 to 80 dBA or dBc, and you're going to be in a pretty happy place with your ears, and also the music's going to actually work. Your ears, by the way, distort and go through nonlinear compression, aka distortion, when we get above about 85 dB. So if you want to monitor accurately, keep it below that point. If you want to blow your ears out and enjoy the fact that your ears are distorting like a guitar amp, crank it up louder, but you don't have a lot of longevity with that option.
It's so interesting because we've
two questions for you. Sorry, Ben.
No, go for it.
The 85 dB threshold that you just mentioned, that isn't standard for everybody. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, right?
Correct.
That's a very biological, personal thing that somebody might have that threshold low, or somebody might have that threshold higher. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a recommended exposure limit under the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health.
Gotcha.
And that's the point that we can start to help protect everybody at that point. That's just a specific standard under that organization. And so that's why I emphasized, prefaced with music exposure, it's very different. Music is very dynamic. Music feels good when it's loud. So I don't want to be known as like the volume police or anything like that. I love turning it to 11. I love cranking up my amp. I love listening to loud music. It feels good. And in certain creative spaces, it's very expressive, right, to be loud. But over time, that's something that can be deleterious and things can change. So if we better understand the numbers and incorporate, if we can find a way to say, okay, from individual to individual, what numbers work for me? I think that's a much better approach. I like to always start off by providing accessible and applicable strategies for folks. So, Nate, when you said the sound level meter on your phone, I talk about that all the time because it's something that you have in your pocket and you're able to better understand what your risk could be, or simply by understanding how loud things are, which might motivate someone to use hearing protection in a certain environment, or maybe if they can turn it down or step aside, distance themselves. It's really just finding ways that'll work for hearing preservation, because everybody's different, but providing them with an understanding what those numbers are, where things start to get loud, and what is the point in which our hearing can change. That's something that I always emphasize. And then we can talk about devices later on. So.
Okay. And then another thing that Frank mentioned with the decibel levels, he mentioned dBA and dBc.
Yeah, I was going to ask that too, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that there's a difference between the two. My SPL meter that I use here in my studio, I can change the setting. What exactly is that for somebody who wants to start paying attention?
Yeah.
What's the one measurement they should be using and why?
dBA, because that mimics the response of the human ear. So a lot of us understand that humans have the frequency range of 20 to 20,000 hertz. So we want to make sure that the sound level meter is actually reading the part of the ear that can be affected. So we're comparing apples to apples. And so with using a sound level meter, dBA can help us predict the potential injury that can happen from that loudness level. What does this number mean to a human?
So what you're saying is dBA is human hearing and dBc is just...
There's just less filtering. It's more linear.
Oh, okay.
So there isn't
More
as much
linear.
of that low frequency cutoff. Yeah.
So dBA would be, like you said, human hearing and take into account the Fletcher-Munson curve, the way that bass rolls off
Right.
with the human hearing. Okay, wonderful. All right, cool.
Yeah, and
Nice.
I was just going to say that it's one of the things that took me quite a while to, as I sort of got more onto mastering and became more of a mastering engineer than a drummer. When I've set my studio up now, the studio I'm in now, I actually set it up so my normal listening level is about 75 dB.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did that because I could spend a long time in here
Sure.
mastering without my ears getting tired.
Yeah.
I'm not an audiologist, so I didn't do it for all the correct reasons, but it just was a number that I could listen to for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And I actually found that mastering at lower levels, you can hear much more detail than you can when it's louder. And I know if you go into a studio, people like turning the big speakers up on the wall because their music sounds really good when it's loud. But actually, you can hear a lot more detail with it turned down than you can when it's louder.
Sure. Yeah. And I love that you're mixing at a lower level because you can, work a lot longer, and it's probably likely that your ears aren't fatigued afterwards, and your ears aren't going to be ringing. They're not going to feel exhausted, and so I think that's something that's safe. I'm glad that's working for you, so.
Yeah.
It's still always good to take breaks and whatnot. What sort of break timing would you recommend if somebody's mixing?
Yeah, so I recommend, especially if you're just listening to your AirPods or your CD player, if at the usable volume on your device, you're seeing that it's at 75% or more, I recommend if you're going to be listening for hours on end, at the end of every hour, just give your ears a 10-minute break. Be in quiet the best that you can. Again, your sensory receptors, your ears, it's not a muscle, so give it a chance to relax, and then you can continue listening. So it's just a generic, safety kind of a reminder. It's just 10-minute break at the end of every hour can be helpful.
Yeah,
Good.
we were talking about this. What's the word I'm looking for? Process of taking a break when you're mixing a song in the world of tape. Guys, if you remember back to our episode, season 1, episode 12 with Jake Fader, he talked about the concept of at the end of every mix, before we had computers and DAWs, you had to wait for that tape to rewind. So you had an automatic built-in 5-minute break, 4-minute break while the tape recued. And we don't have that now, right? Because you can instantly start your song back over and keep going. You can loop it for as long as you like and not take a break. So when you're mixing a song and you're really getting into the creative flow of things, and I'd say that this is even more difficult to break away from than when you're casually listening to something in your living room or outside or on a bus or wherever. How often should you be taking breaks when you're mixing, when you're in that creative process? And I know that can be really difficult to break away from, but is the guideline the same every hour, or should you take more frequent breaks when you're actually in the studio mixing or recording, for that matter?
That's a tough question because I've worked in a lot of studio sessions where it doesn't feel right to step away, even if you have to go to the bathroom 4 hours in. So it's a tough one to answer. I think the goal would be a break every hour. But there's such a good point there that there used to be this built-in pause. There used to be this built-in need to reset the technology. And it's not there anymore. So I don't know. Think of it like the candied ginger between each new piece of sushi. Take not candied, whatever, pickled ginger. Take a moment to cleanse the palate, rest the ears for a moment, and it's gonna do wonders for bringing some real context back to what you listen to the next time.
Candied ginger is delicious, by the way.
I do agree. I love candied ginger, but that would be weird with sushi.
No, and in the live music context, I know a lot of musicians that are like, I never take breaks. I go straight 3 hours or 4 hours, and I'm like, you are not only exhausted by the end of that, but your ears are exhausted. Yeah. Especially if you do in-ear monitors and you've got that, that music pumping and it's exciting and all that stuff. And you don't want to lose the crowd. I get it. The crowd that you do have, if you take a break, they'll start to disperse, and I know that happens. But you do want to give yourself a break because, especially if you're doing 3-4 hour shows, man, my ears will have a little ring to them at the end if I don't take a break.
Well, there's a creative and musical way to take a break, which is work it into your set to have down songs or have a story time or have a song where
rock
it's
music. We just go from one rock song to the next.
Yeah, I get that. But you know who else needs a break is the audience. And they're going to really get punched in the face with your next hard song if you have a moment where it actually breaks down to just the keys or just ensembleize it, arrange it just a little bit. And
I love that.
That can take a breather, right?
I remember shows where the string instruments need to tune. And so the drummer would just play a chill beat for, I don't know, a minute while everybody tuned up. And I'm like, I love that. And I didn't think that it was even a hearing break. But now it makes total sense that it does work as a hearing break. I liked it as a sort of change of pace from.
While I'm tuning the guitar, the drums and the bass, they play some sort of little groove or whatever.
Exactly.
If I'm because when I go capo, like I know I'm gonna.
You have to tune,
things. I'm gonna have to tune some things. It's just my guitar isn't that great.
So when you say give your ears a break, is it just find somewhere quiet? Is it just, do you know what I mean? It's like, what are some good ways to just let your ears, and how long do they need to, that's a good question, isn't it? If I've been at a loud environment, how long do my ears need to actually sort of recover?
I would say your ears are going to tell you the answer to that. And the whole idea that some people are more sensitive than others, some people have what the literature calls tough ears, some people the literature literally calls it soft ears. I'm in the soft ears category. I don't like the terminology, but we don't know who's going to be injured more easily than or not until they get injured, and we don't want that, right? So I would say listen to your ears. If you're like Neil and you leave a 3-hour show with some ringing in your ears, sorry to say, Neil, that's evidence that we need to turn down and we need to fix that.
Yeah,
you're only gonna
that was
get
in the
a
beginning.
handful.
That doesn't happen now.
That's good.
But when I first started, 7 years ago, I was like, oh man, So,
it's like a punch card. Like you only get so many of those before now you have hearing loss, right?
Yeah,
you get one free hearing loss every 10 times you do that.
And I definitely I only need about a 5-10 minute break, really, to kind of just reset, and then I put the in-ears back in, turn it back on. And as far as like quietness, just taking the in-ears out and not playing. I know that I always put on some filler music in between the sets and whatnot, but I know that that's not loud enough to like fit. I'm good. And then I can go right back in. So that small little 10-minute break is really all I need.
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's a one-size-fits-all set number for how long to take a break for. I like how Frank put it, listening to your ears, listening to your body. When we work with folks, I think that's something we mention all the time, is that as a musician, as a person, you know your ears better than anybody else. So listen to your body, and a little bit of a break can help. You can even throw in some hearing protection if you can't step away or distance yourself from the loudness. Throw in some plugs or something, just giving your ears a chance to not have too much of that loudness. Pound down, that anything helps,
Yeah,
anything helps.
So when somebody does walk away from a show, maybe it's not the first time that they've experienced this, and they're beginning to notice that ringing time and time again, and they're like, okay,
that happened to me.
Same here. Right. And this is what prompted me to seek out an audiologist and get my hearing tested. But what do you recommend? I mean, obviously you recommend that people go to an audiologist and get a hearing test, but is there anything that you can share there with finding an audiologist that knows how to test for certain things, or I know there's a difference between a sort of regular audiologist and then one that is adept to servicing musicians and things like that.
Yeah, because is there a difference between like just going to your regular ENT or to do the test or an audiologist? Is there a difference?
So it's probably going to be an audiologist who does the test wherever you end up going, your PCP, your ENT, your audiology location. If it's your local audiologist, I would say that there's not a actual literal difference between what we call music audiologists, which Juan and I would consider ourselves to be, because we primarily see musicians and sound people as our patient population, and your other audiologists who have other practices and other primary patient loads. The biggest difference is just that, is that there's more experience and more kind of nuance and appreciation for what you have to deal with when you're on stage and when you're in the studio and when you're doing all the stuff you do. So in practical terms, there's not like a different degree or a different certification. We just call it a specialty. It's just a subspecialty.
A subspecialty. That's something that they could look out for, right? Is
certainly
an audiologist that specializes in seeing musicians, or sound professionals.
And the first thing I always do whenever I'm trying to find somebody a local audiologist, meaning there's a music audiologist, quote unquote, in almost every major city. There's about 20 or something of us across the US and a couple internationally. But when I see folks on telehealth, we'll see people anywhere in the world. And I'll just Google around for any audiologist, Google, be a sponsor. And the first thing I'm looking for is on their website, do they talk about musicians' earplugs and in-ear monitors in a way that shows that they know what those things are? And then I tell the musician to call them and say, hi, I'm looking to get in-ear monitors. And if they say, to do what now? Just call a different place. That's okay. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Some people have specialties in one thing, some have specialties in another thing. But if you call somebody who says, yes, we work with musicians and we'll be happy to do it, the second thing I want you to do as a musician is say, can I get a hearing test along with this visit? And if they say, no, we don't test hearing, we'll just do impressions and send you out the door, then also hang up and call the next person, because that is a really bad practice. We have best practice documents in our profession saying everybody should get a hearing test, especially people who need their ears to work, like musicians. So that should be kind of that's my two-step entry level. I think Juan, you have something to share with that too, right? Where can we find these people?
You can find some folks for anybody who has the benefit of music cares. They can join music cares and they can actually see a handful of music audiologists virtually. So what I love about, like I said earlier, things that are accessible and applicable, that's something that we can meet folks where they are. If they're on tour, if they're in another state, another country, we can still have a conversation, talk about options and how we can help them individually. And that's something that can be very, very helpful. And I think a really nice entryway to introduce folks who probably have never heard of or what an audiologist is. I didn't when I was, in my garage band in high school. I didn't know what the risk was. I didn't know that this loudness could have an addition to my hearing, which is this high-pitched constant ring that I now have to live with. So it's really just a really fun, accessible way that folks can actually see an audiologist who specializes with this population.
What was the name of the website again? Audio Cares? Is that what you said?
Music Cares.
Music Cares. Sorry.
So it's Grammy Association, Recording Academy, the Grammy people, their charitable wing, Music Cares. And most music industry professionals are eligible. You just have to have, I'm going to get this wrong, 5 years in the industry or 6 commercial releases, something like that. It's not based on need. It's based on your involvement in the industry. So we've seen thousands of musicians across the world through Music Cares visits on telehealth. So that's a great way. One other way that I'll mention to find an audiologist who has specialized or even thought about working with musicians is there is a website. It's an in-ear monitor company called Sensophonics. They're in Chicago. Juan's actually worked there and moonlights for them sometimes as their audiologist. That's how Nate met him over at NAMM.
Yep.
They have a great list called Find an Audiologist, and that list is made up how can I say? It's populated by people who have actually gone through additional training. They've gone and done a 2-day course on how to work with musicians from an audiology perspective. So it's a really good starting place to find somebody who cares.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of information right there, because I think that going to see an audiologist to assess your hearing, absolutely, go and find somebody, right? And if they're not, specialized in seeing musicians, it's better than nothing. But as a professional, I do think that people should seek out someone who does specialize in working with that population. And so, yeah, going to the Sensophonics website and finding somebody that they recommend in their city or closest to them, I think it's worth the effort. Absolutely. And I'll be the first to say that my musician earplugs, not even IEMs, but just the musician earplugs that I can wear when I go to a show or go to a loud environment. I went to the state fair a couple of years ago and I brought them with me. And that was wonderful because it's loud.
Because you couldn't hear what was going on at the state fair?
Yeah, because I didn't have to hear all the cows mooing. Exactly.
Them pigs.
Yeah, if only I could have smell protection when I walk through the barns. Does Sensophonics make the nose plugs too?
I mean, you could stick the earplug in your nose.
Yeah, the foam earplugs in and just breathe through your mouth, right?
Yeah, that'll work.
That'll work.
You
You can't taste it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I will say also that I sometimes use this analogy where if you are a professional athlete and you hurt your leg, you probably should go to like a sports PT or sports orthopedic doc. If you're me, who's never done sports in his life, and I hurt my leg, I'm going down to the closest PT right down the street from me. And that's totally fine, right? But if you rely on your ears for your job, think of your ears like you're an athlete thinks of their knees and neck and arms and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
as important.
Yeah, I think as a group, musicians take their hearing far too much for granted. It's just something you've always had. And somebody says, "Do you want to play in my band?" And you go, "Yeah, all right, we'll go make loads of noise." And I think it's probably only much later in your career, which you two will probably tell me is already too late, that you actually then start thinking, "Oh, I should take care of these things on my head." But by then you've probably done the damage. Like
my dad had My dad had an old joke whenever I would do something risky as a kid, like use a power tool. He would say, "Oh, be careful, that's your piano playing hand." We never talked about that's your piano playing ears, and we never stop and think about, maybe we should be more careful with these floppy things on the side of our heads.
Yeah, true.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. They do get
these guys will tell you
last.
regularly on this podcast. We cover how my wife will point out I'm a terrible geek, and I regularly watch TV and go, "Well, that's nonsense. That's ridiculous." The one I've picked up on recently. It's funny that this is the podcast tonight because I commented on it the other day. There was a scene where an action film, two people are fighting, and they're fighting, and he's got the gun, and the gun goes off by the guy's head. And I turned to my wife and went, "Well, he's not going to hear for a week. I mean, he'll literally hear nothing for a week." And it's like, but I know, next scene, he's just chatting over in a restaurant, having a glass of wine. And you're like, he's sat there going, "What? What?"
Yeah.
That's not possible.
It's not possible. He's just had a
think
shotgun go off by his head. I mean,
with
I
movies,
think not hearing for a week is pretty generous there. I think you might
I
not
don't
be
know
hearing
what
ever
would
out of that
actually
ear.
you fire a gun by someone's head, I don't know what would actually happen. It's not going to be good, though.
No.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some permanent loss. Most people will just have a temporary loss for a couple days like that, or ringing for a couple days. But there could be. I've had patients who've lost a lot of hearing just from a single firearm discharge or a single exposure like that. So acoustic traumas, they're real. So yeah, that's totally true. My other favorite trope with movies is when there's a bomb explosion or some blast or something, and then the soundtrack goes away and you just hear a bing.
Yeah.
That's more accurate.
Yeah. No
Right.
one's hearing anything for a long time, are they?
Yeah, and the sound is really filtered as it sort of like recovers. I'm like, okay, that's like, 25% accurate.
Yeah, but then, extend that over 72 hours and now we've got a more accurate depiction.
Exactly.
It would make for a really boring movie, though.
Second half of the film, it's just people going, write it down.
Yeah, just get it rough.
I'll tell the wife that I was right, though. See?
There you go.
Professionals told me I'm right.
Yes, you were right to ruin the movie watching experience for both of you. You're correct. Good job.
Absolutely.
Win one for
Science.
significant others everywhere, Ben.
Exactly. Oh, this has been great. I've learned so much that I probably wish I knew 30 years ago. But that is true in life generally. So,
Well, but to say that's really accurate with a lot of things, especially with hearing. Like, you've lost your hearing and you're like, God, I wish I knew about hearing protection 30 years ago when I was going to shows, every weekend or multiple times a week or playing in bands, touring, whatever,
Yeah, I remember going to see Iron Maiden when I was 20 something, and they were like the loudest band you could possibly. I mean, it was unbelievably loud. Yeah.
They distorted at a show for Iron Maiden. I've seen them the most. They're one of my favorite bands. They were my first concert. They're awesome. And I remember one show in particular was outdoors, and I started to hear distortions in my ears. I go, that's not the music. That's not this. So it was basically circuitry noise and static kind of going off. I go, ooh, ouch, this hurts. And yeah, that's our ears aren't bulletproof, as much as we love those moments, but way too much time. I think that was my second night in a row too, actually. So maybe that's more on me. But,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
2 nights in a row. Wow.
Yeah.
No, I've had that experience when playing live before. Like I mentioned earlier on, I would stand pretty close to the drummer when I played. And as the show would go on, I would get sort of disoriented auditory wise. A song that I've played hundreds of times before now all of a sudden sounded foreign or in the wrong key. Notes were distorting, but in a way, to me, what I perceived almost as like bending, like the pitch would bend down. And so then I would be like, what note is even happening right now? Like it sounds like something's bending or breaking. And that was my ears just, they're like, all right, we're out.
Giving
Bye.
Yep.
Yeah, we're leaving. And I remember just like standing there on stage, not knowing what song we were playing, where in the song we were. I was just playing the one chord that I could think of that might like make it through the entire song. And yeah, that was when I was like, I need hearing protection on stage. Right. And I know those foam plugs that the bar has in the back in the big jug, you can't hear anything through those as a musician on stage. It filters out way too much. So after 2 songs, I take them out. And then halfway through the set, now I can't hear anything and I don't know where I'm at. And it's just horrible. And it's one of the reasons why I stopped playing live.
It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable.
It's
if you're playing next to the drum set and all you're hearing is that wash of that ride cymbal like right next to you.
Well, and I had amps behind me and just, it's a small club that we played hundreds of times before.
And then you probably couldn't even hear yourself all that well.
Yeah,
right.
You just can't hear yourself. Yeah.
That's one of my biggest pet peeves is being able to hear yourself while you're playing live. Yeah. It can be so frustrating. What band was it recently where the guy like he couldn't hear himself, and he like got into a fight with his guitarist up on stage?
Oh, I just saw that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember who it was, but it was pretty fun to watch.
Jane's Addiction.
Yep.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
He apologized for the record.
Yeah, but still, like on stage, that wasn't professional, but he couldn't hear himself. And so he was getting frustrated, and it was just building and building. And he's trying to sing, and he can't hear himself over the guitar amps that are live on stage. And
so can I just need to clarify something from both you guitarists there. So when you're stood next to the drummer, it's really loud in your ears, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Not thinking of the drummer who is sit there hitting a snare drum
Oh yeah,
for
no,
2
no, no,
hours.
no. You're absolutely right.
Who's like,
No,
right.
absolutely.
So you can walk away. You just wander off. It's fine. You want to be the drummer who
depends.
sat there for
It
2 hours
depends.
hitting a snare
It
drum.
does depend, but I feel bad for the drummer also because I know, like in this case, the club that we play at all the time, the drummer's sitting on his throne, his chair, and next to him is a refrigerator
Correct.
of a speaker set.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not just a stage wedge; it's a fucking refrigerator pointing at his head
Yeah.
with everything coming through it into one ear, right? So he
Yeah.
doesn't have another one to balance it out.
It's a side fill.
It's and I'm just
Yeah.
like, how does any drummer handle that?
So many drummers have left ear hearing loss because of the stage fill there. So you gotta use in-ears, you
My
gotta use
tinnitus
plugs.
is in my left ear.
Absolutely.
Really? It's not
Yeah.
in your right ear, Ben.
No.
Blame your monitor engineers. All these years.
Oh. Where there's blame, there's a claim. Court case
Well, but it's
pending.
additive, right? It's additive. So it's the drum set plus the monitors plus the stage wash. So, I mean, I have a simple piece of advice. When you're using in-ears, or really any monitor, wedges as well, less is so much more. So less things in your monitor, the better. Every time that this was an old trick, all the monitor engineers will reflect this or respond to this. If somebody says that they want more of something, they really want less of something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually less of everything except for what they want more of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Man, if you just take out a little bit of that other stuff that they don't need, suddenly they don't need more of themselves. And so subtractive mixing is going to be so much more your hearing friend. It's less fun, right? Because what we want to do is we want to turn it all up, right? Pump it up, says Elvis Costello. But we
Great
need
song.
to...
I'm so glad you said that. That's a great
I know. It's the best song. I think of that all the time. But we need to bring it back in order to keep your ears from distorting. Because when somebody wants more of literally everything, their ears are just distorting. And that's why they can't hear it all. So you just need less of everything.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's something most people, we could probably do a whole podcast topic on stage monitoring live.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Because it's
the
amazing
whole-
as a drummer, I don't need to hear the guitarist that much. I mean,
at
genuinely,
all.
hear the bass guitarist, hear the vocalist, so I know where we are in the song.
yeah.
I'm not really bothered what the guitarist
The
is playing.
important
Sure.
parts need to be louder. Yeah.
Yeah. Just so rather than push the bass guitar louder, your point is exactly just take the lead guitar out.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
drop it out so you can hear better.
You'll still hear it somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trust me. It's still
You'll
there.
hear it.
Yeah.
You'll hear it.
Because the guitarist has gone over and turned it up to 11 anyway, like they all do.
They are
Well,
called a
and
guitar.
This amp goes to 11.
with the proliferation now of audio equipment that can output line level, we don't have a need anymore for actual amps on stage or speakers on stage, right? So now there's this whole silent stage,
Love it.
Yep,
not
my
phenomenon,
stage
but
is
just
silent. Yep.
just movement, right? Like everybody's bringing amp modelers now, right? And so they just plug right into the house. They get fed through the wedges. You don't have to compete with, guitar amps anymore. I think the only person left that's actually producing any sound live on stage is the drummer.
Yeah.
But even then,
And
you
if-
run an
and if
electric
they-
drum kit. And
Yeah,
And
electric
if they
kit.
have an electric kit, yeah, exactly.
My band has an electric cajon.
Yeah.
Wow.
Rock.
Yes,
That's a
electric
trip.
cajon. So, oh my God, when we were using a regular cajon and we were miking it, Feedback City. It's just
That's a great name for
Really?
a band,
Nightmare.
by the way.
Feedback
Electric-
City?
No, Electric
Oh,
Cajon.
electric cajon.
What a great name for a band.
Feedback City's pretty good too.
Feedback City's pretty
Yeah,
cool
it
as
is.
well. Yeah.
That's
I
pretty
think they
cool,
play
yeah.
very different styles of music, those two bands.
Speaking of band names and former bands and stuff like that, you Juan said you were in a band, in a garage band back then. Frank, you said you were in a band.
Been in too many
I like to
bands.
always ask what it was the name of your first band, just for fun.
And what was the style? What did you guys play?
Yeah.
First band. That's a good question. First is going to be tough. Let me think about that. Oof. Okay, so the first band that we had that we actually like toured around or traveled around and did gigs with was a band called, wait for it, it's called What's with 31 with a question mark at the end because we thought we were cool. Now, to my defense, I was 14.
I love that.
And we still don't know the answer to the question that we were asking. I think it was literally just teens being random. Like
Love it.
random red
I love
garbage.
it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's a cool band name,
31.
actually. I love that.
Oh, God.
Juan,
I
what
still
about
have
you?
some cassette tapes if you want them.
I'll take one.
Nice. Heck yeah.
Yeah, so my band was very similar to Iron Maiden band. I grew up with them, and so very similar melodic, heavy rock music, generally no vocals. First band was called Dark Matter, and over time it evolved into a recording project that I called The Absolute Threshold. So,
Absolute Threshold.
That's
There's some
pretty
good
rad,
band names.
actually.
God.
Shit,
Yeah. How's
yeah.
everyone got good band
Fuck
names?
yeah.
My band names were dreadful.
I was in a band in college called Dr. Wang's Infectious Disease, so I've also been in bad band names.
Okay, that's better. Yeah, there we go.
That's awesome.
That's the one.
That brings
fun
it back
band,
down
though.
to our level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun band.
Nice.
Well, look, this has been great. I know we always say we'll take up an hour of your time, and invariably, because we all just chat about nonsense, it goes on forever. But yeah, definitely a good point to wrap up. I think it's been brilliant. I've learned so much. About
yes.
things that I should already have known more about. So, thank you both very much for that. I think it's a definite topic that people will find interesting, and hopefully will take something away to actually make sure that they do something about it, rather than just go back to listening to music really loud in AirPods for 6 hours.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for having us. I know that I can speak for myself, probably Juan too. I've been biting my tongue to not go into a 2-hour diatribe about each of these topics. You want to talk about vented in-ear monitors and audience mics and custom filtered plugs? We'll be happy to come on back on.
Oh, we'd always love to
Yeah.
have you back. That would be good.
Absolutely. Well, and I think for the listeners, there might be a lot of questions that they're generating as they're listening to this episode. So obviously, the listeners can reach out to you too directly if they have any specific questions. But I'll encourage all of our listeners, if you have questions, send it to sounddiscussionpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to bring these questions together, and then we'll bring Juan and Frank back on for another episode later on.
We
down
could have
the
a
road.
specific episode.
And then we can have a specific
Questions.
Q&A.
Q&A, yeah.
Oops, all
Sounds good.
questions.
For them, yeah. So if you have questions, just send it to us in an email, and we'll bring them together and get these two back on for another episode here, hopefully soon.
Really appreciate
but
that.
in the meantime, if anyone wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you?
You can find me on tunecare.com. That's where I see a lot of virtual consults, and any musicians, you probably are eligible for the Music Cares benefit. And so a lot of us like free stuff, and so it's actually free to see us virtually for a consultation. So I feel like we barely, scratch the tip of the iceberg with a lot of the conversation and topics that we can go into. And so that's a really great opportunity to be specific with your individual needs. So you can see us on there.
Yep,
Right on.
same
Fantastic.
exact thing. And then I'll also add that Juan and I co-host a podcast called Talking Ears, where we talk about ears. Go figure. It's talking heads, but only the part that we care about. And we have people on and talk about this kind of topic in depth. So if you have specific thoughts there too, we're happy to air them in public on that platform. But I would be more than happy to be on back here. This was a lot of fun,
Yeah,
guys.
likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you for being here and being such good sports while we pummel you with questions.
And look like idiots
Nothing
to
about,
experts. Yeah.
No, this was the best part of my day. Thanks, guys. This was fantastic.
Thank you for listening to Sound Discussion. Your hosts are Ben Holmes, Neil Merchant, and me, Nate Kelms. Our theme song is composed and recorded by Jojo Timmerman. You can find us on the internet at sounddiscussionpodcast.com, or you can drop us a line at sounddiscussionpodcast@gmail.com. Additional show notes for this episode can be found on our website or in the description area of your podcast player. A big thank you to our guest for taking the time to chat with us today, and to you, the listener, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be part of our discussion. We look forward to having you join us again next month on another episode.
I was in a band in
of
college
Sound
called
Discussion.
Dr. Wang's Infectious Disease, so I've also been in bad band names.